Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name is Liz, one of your regular hosts here. I've been away for a couple days because I've been, just busy living life. Last reading week of high school. Good lord, it's been that long. So Brady's been holding down the fort, covering all these Winnipeg Jets wins. Lucky for me, they gave me one as well. So we are here with my wonderful friend Lauren Kelly to break down this overtime win against the Tampa Bay Lightning today. Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'm super excited that we got to do this. Lauren and I got to hang out a little bit this summer, talk a little hockey, kind of have some fun together. So we're really excited to be able to jump on Game Over together and talk a little bit about both of our favorite teams facing off for the first time this year. So Lauren, to throw you on the spot a little bit, going into this game, give me the Coles notes of what you were kind of expecting / looking for from the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, obviously the Lightning had just come off that big comeback win against the Bruins a couple of nights ago. So honestly, when this game well, before puck dropped on this game, I expected them to come out hard, play fast, typical Tampa Bay Lightning style. They've been making a lot of mistakes this season, and I think that's indicative of their record. And again, when they went to overtime tonight, I was a little less confident in their ability to close out, just because Connor Hellebuyck is such a good goaltender, and the Lightning don't have Andre Vasilevsky in net right now for them. So I was a little bit more optimistic about the Jets' chances in this game than maybe I would have been a season or two ago.
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw some. I'm so bad when it comes to sports betting. I'm the odds, the money line, the everything is just not my friend. But I think the Jets might have been the favorites going into this game. They've been riding a little bit of a hot streak here, and like you said, a couple, really good goaltender. And I know a lot of people were freaking out about not having Andre Vasilevsky with the Tampa Bay Lightning earlier this year, but Johannes Jonassen, something along those lines. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. Has actually been pretty good for you guys, hey?
Yeah, there are some nights where, that the Jonas Johansson of old, and when I say of old, I mean the guy who played in Buffalo and Colorado, it was probably the worst goaltender in the NHL at one point and a couple of seasons ago, has come out. But for the most part, I feel like he's really raised his game for the Lightning, and thank goodness, because their defense has just been atrocious this season. It's been a very frustrating time, but I can't complain too much.
Absolutely. Well, I think I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. So we're going to dive into this game. For those of you who are here in the chat, thank you so much for joining us on this fine Wednesday evening. For everyone listening back tomorrow or whenever you listen to your podcast, thanks for tuning in to get excited about this Jets, 4-game winning streak now with me. The Tampa Bay Lightning defense, you sort of segued into that, and I kind of want to talk about it a little bit. We were coming into this game knowing that the Winnipeg Jets top lines and some of their scorers have been doing pretty well. And Tampa Bay has always been an offensive powerhouse, a 1A defenseman powerhouse, a goaltending powerhouse. But the defense as a whole, don't know if it was the strongest I've seen from the Tampa Bay Lightning in the last couple of years this evening. Talk a little bit about kind of what you saw on that end.
Yeah, and I think the Jets, to their credit, did a great job of really pressuring the Lightning defense. They're not as strong in zone as they have been in past seasons when they went and won their championships. I think that the Jet cycle really threw the Lightning defense for a loop. There's just a lot of new faces in that blue line right now, and it's obvious that these guys aren't used to playing. The newcomers aren't used to playing this system, but then the older, more veteran players, I guess you could say, like we're seeing some uncharacteristic mistakes from Mikhail Sergachev and Victor Hedman. And I thought the Jets did a really good job of exposing those players tonight throughout the Lightning blue line. They were pressuring them on zone entries, really worked hard to make life as difficult as possible for Jonas Johansson with multiple rebounds, really did a good job of getting to the key areas of the ice. And yeah, I thought it worked out in their favor with the overtime win tonight.
Yeah, 100%. So I think maybe let's dive into a couple of those goals. You pointed to the overtime winner. Let's talk about that one a little bit first. I always love when you get to watch the replay on the broadcast 8 9 times, right? Because you watch every player at least once to try and see kind of what happened there. And full credit to the players out there. I was not expecting to see a Nikolaj Ehlers, or no, sorry, that ended up being a Neil Pionk, Adam Lowry, Vlad Namestnikov line out in overtime. Never mind scoring the winning goal, but I give them credit where it's due because I really liked the way that Namestnikov kind of pulled that puck onto the boards there and managed that top defender to give some room down low. And I want to say it was Neil Pionk who found that pass. I guess that's the only extra player that I'm missing. And he sort of froze the goaltender up right on that left post there, and Adam Lowry had his work cut out for him, and he had that patience. And later at the end of that third period there, mind you, there was that one moment where Morgan Barron had that absolute wired shot from close to the goaltender because he had no idea how much space he had in this context with the 3-on-3. Adam Lowry knew he had some time. No mistake on that shot. It's pretty textbook. It was a great one. It was pretty similar to whose goal? Josh Morrissey's goal in that one where the puck was able to kind of sail across and give that guy who's open on the goalie's, what would that be, blocker side to find that open space.
Yeah, and I think that's the way you kind of expose a goalie like Jonas Johansson, whose rebound control and the lateral movement is maybe not as strong as the typical NHL goalie, a regular starter in this league. And I thought, especially that rush from Pionk to kind of drive towards the net on the overtime winner, pull attention basically to all of the Lightning skaters on the ice were focused on him and left Lowry wide open at the post. And all he had to do was get him the puck. And then obviously that's how the overtime winner was scored. And then especially we saw it again with I think it was the second Jets goal, the one where there's a big rebound off the pad of Johansson. And then I think, was it Scheifele who scored that one?
Yeah.
I know he scored the first one too, but yeah, it's just a really good job of, working in zone, circling, getting to open areas and kind of timing their plays right.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the reason that some of those goals were so exciting for the Jets, that Mark Scheifele goal that you just talked about, that I want to say it was a power play goal, or was it the Josh Morrissey? I can't remember what they had a power play goal, which is always exciting for this team. And like you said, rebound control. I think that that's something that, I always, I'm very transparent with our audience and anyone who's listening in that I don't take pride in how I evaluate goaltenders. Was he good or was he not? That's going to be my take of the day. But one thing that's pretty easy to kind of take a look at is how a goaltender's rebounds look just on any given game. I can't explain why that is or isn't the case, but in this game I found that there were a couple more of those chances that the Winnipeg Jets were able to actually get some shots on, which is really nice because I've struggled with how the Winnipeg Jets collapsed at the front of the net for a good chunk of this season, and I thought that there was a little bit more energy on their side to be able to actually capitalize on those opportunities, since there were more of them than they may or may not be used to, which led to a couple goals in this game, which is really fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about just the Winnipeg Jets offense as a whole. A couple of players tonight that I thought looked pretty good. I was telling Lauren before we jumped on, this game was kind of chaotic for a couple reasons, and it wasn't chaos for one person really more than it was for another. I say most game overs I come on, I have a couple key players that I could talk about for the whole show because of just how good or bad or exciting or just off the board they were in that given night. But tonight I felt that everyone was kind of fine. So no real big outliers or anything, but along this Winnipeg Jets forward group tonight just seemed like a night that everyone was pretty good, which is sometimes what I'll take from this team, because sometimes they're a little bit all over the place. So Lauren, what did you think of the Winnipeg Jets first line, the top line of Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, and Alex Iafallo, and how they managed their offensive game tonight, as well as how they managed that back checking transition and how they worked in zone against the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Yeah, and I felt for the most part that was probably the Jets' strongest line. I completely agree with you. I thought really for the Jets, there wasn't one line that kind of stood out above the rest. I thought everybody really pulled their weight in this game. Everybody played the role that they were supposed to, and all four lines were kind of they were rolling them really smoothly up and down the ice. But obviously your top line is your most skilled players, and I thought Kyle Connor had several chances that he generated himself. Scheifele as well looked very impressive. Iafallo's kind of that guy who you don't really notice until maybe he's the one, putting the puck in the back of the net, but he's doing all the little things on the ice, getting the pucks to Scheifele and to Connor out of those battles on the board. And so I thought really I was pretty impressed with their offensive, I guess, their kind of offensive structure. As far as like the defensive side of the ice, and I'm sure this is not necessarily criticism, but I'm sure this has been discussed before. It wasn't 100% as confident in their abilities. I felt like they were a little bit caught puck watching on a few sequences. The Braden Point goal in particular, that tied the game up 2-2, where Kyle Connor lost the puck battle along the boards, and then he was kind of caught in no man's land as Point walked in basically alone and beat Hellebuck with that perfect shot. So there's good things that they can take away, but obviously there's still things to improve upon. But that's the way it goes with kind of these chaotic games where, the puck is just going end to end and there's chances back and forth. And so for the most part, I thought the Jets' first line looked really good.
100%. And I want to show everyone, for those of you who are watching live, I want you to take a look at your screens and look at this picture that Lauren sent me. She sent me a screenshot of this game. She knows exactly what I'm talking about with the Braden Point goal, where Kyle Connor is just a couple steps behind on the back end there, as he often is. And that was kind of what that sequence was. I do not want to take away from Braden Point's beautiful shot there. I think Connor Hellebuck's reaction just kind of really encompassed how nice that shot was. Like, it was just, sometimes you got to give it to him. But that came right after a big scramble in front of the net, which came right after the other big scramble in front of the net that almost led to a goal, right? So when you have the chance to clear that puck, you have to do it. And that was Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele on that, right side board, that they didn't manage the puck properly there, and then out it comes, and then Kyle Connor's not fully on his guy, and then Braden Point does what Braden Point does, especially in the month of May. I guess he can do it in November too. Sucks to find out that way, but congrats on the nice goal or whatever, Braden Point. But we have a couple people in the chat saying that, full credit to the Lightning for playing a pretty good hockey game tonight. And I do want to credit them for that as well. I think that there were some exciting things that I saw from the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight. It's always a pleasure to watch players like Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov play. Give us, Lauren, from the outsider perspective for what we're used to, the general just on what you saw from your team tonight.
Yeah, I mean, this game was pretty much textbook 2023-24 Lightning for me. I think you and I discussed earlier tonight that you had never seen the Jets play this kind of chaotic game, at least not this season. And that has been my team all season long. It has just been the most chaotic offensive sequences followed by the most catastrophic breakdowns defensively that are pretty uncharacteristic for at least the core group of this team. So this was just more of the same kind of like, okay, we're going to get some chaos end to end action. There's going to be heavy cycles and pretty high danger scoring chances for both sides given how they're playing. And then obviously when it goes to overtime, it's anyone's game. And the Lightning have this very frustrating trend of, if they lose the opening face-off in overtime, they will lose the overtime game. And that's exactly what happened again tonight. And the one time they didn't lose in overtime this season was against Boston 2 nights ago, when they won the opening face-off in overtime. So as soon as they lost the overtime face-off in this game, I pretty much knew that they were going to end up losing this game, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
100%. Yeah, I've definitely, and I've heard that there's some discussions that are going to be happening in the league about this overtime, because when was it implemented? Like, I don't know how many years ago it used to be, and it often still is just like pure chaos unleashed, whatever. But then sometimes you get those games where it's like the cycle back and the hold on to the puck and the one rush and whatever, and it's like, then yeah, it's like if you win, it's almost like NFL overtime rules, right, where it's like, oh, you won the coin toss, you won the game, congrats, sort of thing. So credit to the Winnipeg Jets for not fumbling when they had Lowry, Pionk, and Ehlers on the ice. What a lineup. Not what I would have chosen by any means, but all the power to him for starting and being able to manage it like that. I want to jump into a couple of things that I specifically want to talk to Lauren about. But before we do that, I see a couple of comments in the chat about Kyle Connor, a couple of praises about how exciting he is. Can we just talk about him for a second here? Because I almost compare Kyle Connor to like a sibling at this point. Now, what I mean by this is sometimes your siblings like annoy you and they bother you or whatever, and you're like, oh, they do this or they do that. But then an external person is like, oh yeah, your sibling is kind of annoying, and then it's like, oh, like it's on, buddy, like you're ready to catch these fists. Like I can say that, but you can't. Like I find that, like, when people from other markets are like, oh, Kyle Connor is so bad defensively, I'm like, yeah, but you can't say that. I can. But right now, Kyle Connor is getting a lot of attention because he's like a top scorer in the NHL. And Sam Costantino, in particular, today, before the game started, noted that Kyle Connor is an exceptional player, and I quote, in all three zones. And I wanted to say thank you, but I also just, I can't accept that praise. I can accept that he's getting some praise for being, league scoring title, congrats to the boy, but all three zones. People in the chat are talking about the one back check he had today, and I think when it comes to how good a player is defensively, I try not, like, back checking trust. Like, if you can back check, good for you. You need to do that. And sometimes Kyle Connor doesn't do that. But any fast player can back check. They're all capable of it. Like, it's, and so in a situation like that where Kyle Connor had that gorgeous back check, he did, he used what his mama gave him kind of thing, right? Like, you used your abilities in a different capacity, but his in zone management is not something that I would write home about in a good way, right? So, just can you, from an outsider's perspective, Lauren, because I feel like I'm just so biased towards everything that Kyle Connor does at this point, just talk a little bit about this player. Not just what you saw from him tonight, but just kind of what your thoughts are from an outside of the market. What everyone's talking about him for, and what your opinion on this player is.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that comes to mind for me when I think about a player like Kyle Connor is that, this is a player, high offense, high skill. And if he's not on your team, then you're the one who's frustrated, right? Like, this is such a talented, highly skilled player that, is such a key part of this Winnipeg Jets group. And I completely agree. I think you shouldn't be playing in the NHL if you can't back check. That's not to say like maybe slower skaters have harder time back checking, but it's more the effort that is the key point with a lot of players that I see in junior. Is there the you put your head down and get your ass back to the defensive zone as fast as you can, and whether or not you can is a reflection on your skating abilities. But as long as I see the effort and the intensity and the willingness to get back to help out your defenseman, and I think that's what's really more important than whether or not you can effectively back check. And obviously we saw that from Connor tonight. That sort of thing is not necessarily as worrying or troublesome to me. Like, I think, every NHL coach is going to hound on their guys to get back to help support their defensemen, no matter what, no matter who's up in the play or how far back they are. And then again, I agree. It's more the in zone defense that is kind of a struggle, but I feel like for the most part, a lot of players have those nights or those shifts where they kind of just get caught puck watching for half a second, and then all of a sudden the puck's in the back of the net. So it's kind of one of those mistakes that, it does happen. And, it only happened once tonight for Connor, which is, by all accounts, pretty positive showing from him. So I don't really think, truthfully, I don't hear a lot of criticism about Kyle Connor defensively, at least not from what I see on Twitter. Clearly, I'm not following a lot of Jets fans, but I honestly don't think he played all that night. He played all that poorly defensively tonight either. I thought he was really good on some shifts. And it's just kind of cleaning up those mistakes, or kind of realizing that you shouldn't be, puck watching, but then everybody's going to make those mistakes at some point, right? You can't expect players to be perfect defensively. It was kind of one of those things where, he kind of may drive you nuts on some shifts, and you wish that he had done this differently or that differently. And there's a player like that on every single team in this league. So one of those things where, would you rather not have him on the team, or would you rather have him on the team and kind of put up with these kind of little like errors every now and then? And I think Jets fans would probably agree that they want Kyle Connor on this team for a long time.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know what, that is a fair, that is a reasonable assessment. Let's run with it. We're good. So for those of you who are listening live, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all the support over here at Game Over. The reason I brought Lauren on tonight is not just because she's wonderful and has good taste in music and is very fun to be around. Lauren's also one of the smartest people in hockey that I've ever had the chance to meet. She is wonderful, and as you could probably tell from the 20 minutes we've been talking so far, very articulate and very well-rounded in her thoughts. She also works for Elite Prospects as an OHL scout. So I want to hear a little bit, Lauren, about a couple of players from your perspective. So Cole Perfetti was a player in this game tonight who played a couple years in the OHL. Know you're familiar with his game. I'd love to talk about him a little bit. And then also for all the Jets fans who are listening in, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Colby Barlow. We really like this draft pick that the Winnipeg Jets have picked up in the last couple months. We liked seeing what you saw from him at Dev Camp and training camp. Seems like a really nice kid. We'd love to hear your OHL scout thoughts on these two players. What you saw from Cole Perfetti when he was younger, and when you were watching him as a scout, and now what you see from him in the NHL, and what your thoughts are on his development, as well as what you think about Colby Barlow and where he's at right now.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with Perfetti. I was pretty impressed by him tonight. I haven't watched a lot of him since he left the OHL, but he was pretty much everywhere tonight. Scoring chances, good work along the boards, puck protection. Undersized players like that need to learn how to create space for themselves in the NHL. And I think he's really finding his footing. He looks a lot more grounded and more centered and more confident in his own abilities this season. Really, obviously, we know the talent level and the two-way presence that he was in Saginaw and in the OHL. And I think that's going to help his translatability as he, works his way into, full-time top six minutes for the Jets. Eventually, hopefully, taking that offensive step forward. But I thought he looked really good in this game. I was pretty impressed by him. And as far as Colby Barlow goes, he was, I think, the first OHL player taken in June. So we had ranked him at Elite Prospects, I think, on our final board behind two other OHL players, in Quentin Musting and Callum Ritchie. It's not so much in Barlow's case is that it's not really a reflection on what he did at the end of last season, but more that the other two players kind of took major steps forward. And as far as, the type of player he is, super great shot, well-rounded kind of defensive game. Everybody who has ever met this kid has said that he's a tremendous leader. He's a really good influence in the locker room. He was, I think, the youngest captain named in Owen Sound attack history. And then I think when he came back to the OHL this season, he missed, I think, the first couple of games of the year, and then it's kind of been like a slow grind a little bit. And I think the concern with Barlow at the draft was, how high is this player's ceiling? He's already pretty physically developed, and, is this the kind of player he just is in the NHL, or is there still kind of room for him to grow and, find some areas to improve, like his playmaking ability? What kind of skater can he be at the NHL level? Because that was one of the weaker assets of his game last season. And I think, we all know about the torrid shot and the pretty talented goal scoring ability. And I think, when he came back to Owen Sound this season, there was that expectation that he was just going to take off offensively. And I don't know if we've really seen that yet necessarily. Don't get me wrong. He's like a point per game player now. I think he's got 14 points in 14 games, 9 goals. And he's playing on a kind of middling to not bottom feeder, but the Owen Sound is struggling right now, especially in a pretty competitive division. The production is fine, but it's not kind of the dominant score that I was expecting to see from Barlow this season. And I wonder if that's been affected by injuries. He's missed, I think, the last few games with what I think is being reported as a muscle strain injury. Owen Sound's being pretty quiet with the details, but I don't know if he's going to play this weekend, but hopefully he's on the mend from that. Yeah, I mean, basically with Barlow, I mean, I think the Jets have a really talented player in their system, and Jets fans should be very excited about him. It's just what kind of offensive impact can he have this season, and then where can he continue to grow? I don't think he's really done anything to suggest that he'll be on Canada's World Juniors team this year, but definitely next year, I would be fairly confident that he will at least play himself into the conversation to make that team. And yeah, it's just really the sky's the limit for, first round picks, but we are almost, in Barlow's case, it's almost how much further can he improve the game that he is currently, because he's already pretty much a professional player in junior. And then, is they're just like, I would honestly, Barlow is pretty much the safest projection at this point. It's just, what kind of offensive growth can he show at this point?
Yeah, and I think those are some really good points, because that's always the question mark when it comes to players. When you look at where they're going to be 10 years from now or whatever, like if he ends up being an Adam Lowry type of player, every team is okay with having an Adam Lowry type of player, because that's a really important player to your team. But when you're looking at kind of what the first round is for, it's for that high-end talent. So you wonder, if that's going to be a hindsight bias of, oh, maybe they shouldn't have gone that route. That doesn't mean he's not going to be an impactful player to this team. And like you said, the ceiling, we don't know where it is. You never know where it is. But it's always important to kind of take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to drafting, as we all do here in Winnipeg. I think every team, I'm sure, has question marks around their drafting. It's something that a lot of Jets fans actually take pride in when it comes to our team. I think we've been pretty impressed with how our team has drafted over the last couple of years, generally speaking. None of those crazy first round busts, other than our one and only number 64 2016 first round draft pick, but we don't have to talk about him right now. But just out of curiosity, like, you obviously, when it comes to drafting prospects and kind of how they grow and what drafting looks like versus what they look like in D+1, D+2, and beyond that when it comes to growth. I think we just love to hear a little bit about your thoughts out, you don't have to look specifically at who the Jets have drafted in the last little bit, but just as far as drafting strategies go and what, teams look for at the time and how to sort of gauge what you might get from a player if you haven't seen their full potential yet at the age of 17, 18. We'd just love to pick your brain on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think our drafting philosophy, at least I can only speak for my own scouting team, but obviously you break down players' skill set, like shot, passing, ability, hockey sense, physicality. And when I say physicality, I don't just mean whether or not this guy can throw a hit. I mean, how does he protect the puck? How does he use his frame in winning battles and that sort of thing? It's not just necessarily about who's like going around running into like 600 people on the ice. So we evaluate kind of based on that. I am more inclined to gravitate towards players who demonstrate hockey sense and defensive awareness and capability, especially at this young age. I feel like that's something you could probably teach a player as they ascend through the next levels of hockey. But I feel like that's almost something that gives players an edge. Like if you already have a well-rounded defensive game at 16 to 17 years old, then it's just going to make for an easier translation. Skating is also a big factor. I mean, I think the common theme with the OHL first rounders last spring was that none of them were really great skaters. So you look at Barlow, who's a little bit slower, Callum Ritchie, Quentin Musty, all of them had their different skating problems. Skating is probably the skill I would say is the easiest to fix, not necessarily in that, if you're a bad skater, you'll just become Connor McDavid in one day. But if you work with the right skating coaches and if you can fix, the mechanics of the stride a little bit, then you're probably better off, as opposed to, if you're not necessarily, if your hockey sense is kind of lagging a little bit behind, I have less of a belief that it will translate as effectively the player. I mean, so it's all about what different NHL teams value, I guess. In the first round, obviously, for second round, I would hope that teams are going for skill, for best player available. We know that's not necessarily the case, given how some teams have drafted in the past. Some teams really go into their especially if they're in like that second half of the first round range, they're maybe looking to fill organizational need. I don't necessarily believe in that philosophy for every team. Obviously, every team's different, but I'm always a firm believer that you draft the best player available, and usually that is high skill, and you worry about all the other things after that.
Yeah, I definitely feel very vindicated right now because I've also always been on team choose the best player available. So you guys heard it here first. I'm going to become a professional scout. So I just want to open up the chat now to any questions if anyone has anything in particular they want to talk about, whether it's about the OHL, about any of the Jets prospects right now, or about tonight's game, because obviously we're still here to talk a little bit about that. So while we wait to see if any questions trickle into the chat, not every day do we get to talk about or to someone from an Eastern Conference team. We only play each other twice a year. So I always love looking at some of the common denominators that teams have. And I'm sure a lot of Jets fans are curious to hear, how is Mikey Eyssimont doing? I thought I heard his name a lot tonight. I feel like he was playing some decent minutes for the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight. And these Tampa Bay Lightning, this isn't a team of chumps here. Like, this is a pretty good hockey team. So it sounds like he's playing a decently important role for you guys, at least from my super limited perspective of just tonight. Any thoughts on Mikey Eyssimont? What's he been up to?
Yeah, and I think for a team like the Lightning, it's really important to have a player like Mikey Eyssimont, super fast, super speedy, very complimentary player. And I think right now he's kind of being bounced kind of back and forth between the second and third lines, sometimes injected into that line if the Lightning feel like they need a little bit more speed on their third line. He'll play with Tanner Jeannot and Nick Paul. Other times you might find him up with Anthony Cirelli and Steven Stamkos. He's kind of that almost that kind of Yanni Gourde type replacement that the Lightning had in their cup runs. That kind of energy presence, good on the forecheck, good in like small areas, can outwork players along the boards. I definitely feel like he's more of one of the more underrated trade deadline acquisitions they had last year. I feel like everybody was so dialed in on the Tanner Jeannot trade and like the 600 picks that they gave up for him. And we kind of overlooked that Namestnikov to trade for Eyssimont. And I feel like that has been the trade that has probably worked out the best for the Lightning, at least in short term.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned him. Our Vladdy boy was also playing with the Tampa Bay Lightning for a little while as well. What are your thoughts on Vlad Namestnikov? I can speak super briefly on our thoughts. We love him. We are so glad he's here. What do you think of that player?
I mean, I really like Namestnikov. I think he was actually drafted by the Lightning all the way back in, I think, 2011. He was their first round pick. That was the draft. They got Kucherov in the second round and Andre Palat in the seventh round. That was a really big draft for the Lightning. And I feel like Namestnikov gets so overlooked when it comes to that draft because obviously the two players that they drafted after him have taken such exponential leaps in the NHL. But Namestnikov has really kind of bounced back and forth. What kind of player is he for different teams? Like he spent a bit in San Jose and then obviously in Winnipeg. He's sort of finding his niche as very similar player to Eyssimont, it feels like. Very speedy, very energy presence for, a third or second line, depending on where, a team feels like they can use his kind of boundless energy, it almost feels like. So I feel like it was a trade for two very similar players that, they swapped at last year's deadline. And I feel like it's worked out really well for both teams.
Yeah, 100%. I think Namestnikov, I always kind of, like to make the joke he's not the stepfather, he's the father that stepped up because he fully was not expecting to play in this team's top six by any means. Pretty sure he was supposed to be on the fourth line going into the season. But then the unfortunate injury with Gabe Vilardi happened so early into the year. I want to say game 3 or game 4. And he just had to come in and all of a sudden be on that second line with some question marks, if I'm being completely honest with you. And I love Cole Perfetti with my whole heart, but this is kind of his, his sophomore season with, no injuries so far. Cross your fingers, touch wood, do whatever superstition you need. But he's still a pretty unproven quantity in the NHL, and Nick Ehlers is Nick Ehlers. I don't think I really need to explain that one. So we really got thrown into a bit of a situation that wouldn't necessarily set anyone up for success. And he's been able to manage just kind of the chaos and the ups and downs of that line really well. And I think he's just a really, really important part to this team. Lucas in the chat is saying that he can play literally anywhere, and that's exactly it. And the Winnipeg Jets have been missing that sort of player ever since they lost Matthew Perreault. There are lots of players that can play everywhere, but that doesn't mean they should. And Vlad Namestnikov is someone who, I fully believed in his ability to jump up for a couple shifts or for a couple games to play on any line if needed. But for this longer stint, he hasn't been dragging that line down by any means. He's really been supporting them, if anything at all. So, on behalf of all Jets fans, we are very thankful that he is now a part of our system. We are very, very happy to have him here. But just to kind of close things off, just to wrap up the show, Lauren, any thoughts, just kind of going into the next little bit? We're almost at the quarter way midpoint of the season. Thanksgiving, obviously, is always a time that people can benchmark to sort of see where their teams are at, how they should be feeling, and things like that. Just how are you feeling about the Winnipeg Jets? What are your thoughts on this team, and what do you think we're going to see from them as we go into the new year?
Yeah, so I had to pull up the standings because I feel like I haven't paid attention to the Western Conference at all this season outside of, how badly Edmonton looks. But I mean, they're second in the Central right now, which is honestly a pretty good spot to be in. I mean, only 1 point back of the Stars for first place. I feel like this is a different kind of feeling Jets team. And I feel like in maybe seasons past where, it was kind of felt like this team had enough to get maybe through 2 or 3 rounds, but this feels like a very different Jets team almost. And even with if you hadn't mentioned the injury to Gabe Vilardi, I wouldn't have even noticed like there was anything amiss with the way that the lines were rolling tonight. I think this is kind of that we this benchmark where the American Thanksgiving rolls around, where teams really start to find their identity, and if they're in a good spot by American Thanksgiving, hopefully they're able to keep it up and sustain it for the rest of the year. Obviously, there's a lot of hockey still left to be played, but I feel like the Jets look really good. I mean, there's not necessarily any overtly glaring weaknesses, at least from what I saw tonight. And I think this is kind of a team that, if they can maybe see what their deadline plans are, if they can make like that kind of one trade that maybe either rounds out the defense or like adds to their depth of off their secondary scoring, that sort of thing, then maybe this is a team that can finally go all the way.
What a great note to end on. That makes us so excited to hear. I know it's been a big question mark, a lot of pessimism around the Winnipeg Jets, whether it's warranted or not for however many years, but seems like the first time in a while people are like kind of sustainably on board with how this team is looking. Again, 4-game win streak, could not be happier about that. Super excited and kind of all in on this team. Thanksgiving is a great benchmark, like we said. And I'm feeling pretty good going into the Thanksgiving break. I want to say we might have a couple days off. I think the next Jets game might be on Friday. Just kidding. We really don't have a couple days off. But still, it's a time, hopefully, if there's Thanksgiving dinners going on tomorrow or anything, the Jets are able to join their families for that and all that good stuff. I know we're notorious for having a ton of Americans on our team. So those of us who are real already had our Thanksgiving last month. So we're good to go. But Lauren, thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful episode this evening. Super glad that I got to walk home with the win, not just from the Jets game, but because I got to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. For everyone who's here, make sure you like the stream on your way out if you're listening live. If you're listening back tomorrow, thank you again for tuning in to Game Over Winnipeg. We will see you on Friday. I want to say I have a guest. I usually do because I don't like doing these alone. So if you want to know who it is, check it out then, because that's when you'll find out, because I don't remember. I have a couple of really exciting ones lined up for the next couple games. So make sure you check us out. We'll be here after every Jets game. Myself or Brady will always be here breaking down all things Winnipeg Jets. So, Lauren, have a wonderful evening. Everyone, have an awesome Wednesday, and we will see you next time.